Have you ever thought about what makes a space feel like home? Is it the walls that keep you safe? The furniture, the memories? The little imperfections that make a house yours? Now imagine a space that doesn't stay the way you left it. A room that grows overnight. A door that wasn't there yesterday. A house that keeps expanding, shifting, rearranging itself, until one day you turn a corner and realize you're lost in your own home. That's the problem with space. We think we understand it. We measure it, map it, control it. But space is not as rigid as we'd like to believe. Sometimes it bends. Sometimes it grows. And sometimes it does things that should be impossible. Enter SCP-184, also known as the Architect. A small, smooth, metallic object no bigger than a fist. A perfect dodecahedron, each face adorned with a tiny circular hole. Each vertex capped with a small metallic sphere, harmless to the touch, silent, unassuming. And yet, given time, this little object will turn any enclosed space into an architectural nightmare. Object Class Euclid. The SCP Foundation, an organization dedicated to securing, containing, and protecting anomalies like SCP-184, has very strict rules about what to do with this thing. Namely, never, ever put it inside a building. The consequences of doing so are, well, let's just say they involve a lot of demolition and more than a few missing persons reports. Currently, SCP-184 is attached to a high-powered electromagnet at all times. The containment area, a public park where it's disguised as a piece of abstract sculpture. You could be walking past it right now and never know. That's the idea. Any structure affected by SCP-184 is to be immediately demolished, unless the Foundation decides it's worth further study. Even then, no one enters without backup. Nobody wants another Kowloon walled city incident. What does it do? SCP-184's effect is simple but devastating. The moment you introduce it to an enclosed space, it gets to work. First, it stretches the room outward. Your bedroom triples in size. Your hallway becomes a corridor. Then it starts creating new rooms, perfectly furnished copies of existing ones. Except the copies aren't always. Right. Books made of glass. Microwaves carved from wood. Chairs with too many legs. And the longer SCP-184 stays inside, the worse it gets. Doors open to blank walls. Hallways twist in on themselves. Staircases lead nowhere. And somewhere, deep inside, a heart of impossible architecture beats. Growing. Waiting. Hungry for more space. This story is about what happens when someone finds SCP-184. And unfortunately, what happens when they make the mistake of bringing it home. The house was supposed to be their fresh start. Eric and Vanessa Thompson had spent months searching for something within their budget, something livable, in a decent neighborhood, where their son could have his own room. When they found the old two-story colonial at the end of Ash Grove Lane, it felt like a miracle. The place needed work, sure, but it had charm, hardwood floors, bay windows, a big backyard. Most importantly, it was cheap. Needs a little love, the realtor had admitted, stepping over a warped floorboard. But for the price, a steal. Vanessa, ever the optimist, had squeezed Eric's hand. We can make this work. So they signed the papers, moved in with their 6-year-old son Oliver, started unpacking, and that was the last normal day they would ever have. The trouble began small. Eric first noticed it in the hallway by the stairs. He was carrying a box of books to the study when he stopped, frowning. Was this hallway always this long? He muttered. He could have sworn it had been half the length yesterday. But now, it stretched an extra few feet, just enough to feel off. He shook his head, blaming exhaustion. They'd been moving nonstop for days. That night, Vanessa commented on it too. Babe, did you move the couch? Eric looked up from assembling Oliver's bed. No, why? Vanessa stood in the living room, arms crossed. I don't know. The room feels bigger. They laughed it off. Maybe the house felt different because it was still unfamiliar. Maybe their minds were playing tricks on them. They didn't laugh the next morning. Oliver was the first to find the new door. Daddy, he called, his voice small. There's another closet. Eric, half asleep and clutching his coffee, trudged to the hallway. Oliver stood in front of a narrow wooden door that had not been there yesterday. "What the hell?" Eric put his hand on the doorknob. The hinges groaned as he pulled it open. Inside was a perfectly ordinary storage closet. Empty shelves, dust on the floor. It smelled like old wood. Vanessa poked her head in. "Did we miss this during the walkthrough?" "We had to," Eric muttered, though he didn't believe it. He distinctly remembered putting their coats in the only closet in the hallway yesterday. Vanessa shrugged. "More storage, I guess. No complaints here." Eric shut the door. He told himself it had always been there, that they were just exhausted. Then 2 days later, the closet was gone. The first time Eric truly felt the fear was when he got up for a midnight snack. The house was silent, save for the hum of the fridge. He grabbed a beer, leaned against the counter, and stared at the doorway leading into the hall. Something was wrong. The kitchen had a door on each side, one leading to the living room, the other to the hall. But now there were 3 doors. His breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he approached the new doorway. The knob was ice cold under his fingers. He turned it. A room, one he had never seen before. It looked like a guest bedroom. Floral wallpaper, an old dresser, a bed with neatly folded sheets. His heart pounded. He took a step inside. The air was stale, like it had been sealed shut for years. But what made his stomach churn, what made him break into a cold sweat, was the framed photo on the nightstand. It was of his family, him, Vanessa, and Oliver. Except the background wasn't their house. It was this room. Eric backed away slowly. He slammed the door shut, heart racing. When he opened it again, it led to the living room. The guest bedroom was gone. By the end of the week, the house had changed in ways they could no longer ignore. Rooms were growing. Doors appeared and disappeared at random. The upstairs bathroom now had 2 sinks when it had definitely only had one before. The hallway closet shrank overnight, then stretched the next day. Eric started keeping track, marking the walls with a pencil. His marks moved. Vanessa tried to pretend everything was normal. "Maybe the floor plan is just weird," she reasoned. "Old houses settle." Eric wanted to believe her. He really did. Then Oliver went missing. It happened in the middle of the night. Eric woke to Vanessa shaking him violently. Eric, wake up!" His heart jumped to his throat. "What? What's wrong?" "It's Oliver." Vanessa's voice was barely a whisper. "He's not in his room." They tore through the house, shouting his name, checked every room, every closet, the backyard. Nothing. Then they heard it. A child's voice, faint, muffled. "Mommy." Eric froze. It was coming from inside the walls. He pressed his ear to the drywall, heart hammering. "Oliver? Help me." Vanessa sobbed. "Oh my God." Eric didn't think. He grabbed a hammer from the toolbox and swung. The wall crumbled, revealing a dark space beyond. A hallway. Not a hidden compartment. Not the next room. A hallway that should not exist. Eric crawled inside. "Oliver, where are you, buddy?" Footsteps. Tiny, rapid footsteps echoed from somewhere deep in the impossible corridor. Then Oliver's voice. "Daddy." Eric turned his flashlight on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing more hallways, twisting, branching, going in directions that defied logic. At the far end, Oliver stood, pale, eyes wide. "Daddy," he whimpered. "The house won't let me leave." Then from the darkness behind him, a door creaked open, and something stepped out. Eric's blood ran cold. Oliver stood at the far end of the impossible hallway, trembling. Behind him, the door yawned open, spilling deeper darkness into the passage. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the other side. Eric surged forward. "Oliver, run!" Oliver whimpered and darted toward him, bare feet slapping against the warped wooden floor. Eric held out his arms, ready to grab his son, but the hallway stretched. The space between them grew. Oliver's small body became distant, like he was running in place. His cries echoed, warping, as if the house itself was swallowing them. Vanessa's voice, raw with terror, pierced through from the other side. "Eric, get him out of there!" He sprinted, legs burning. But the harder he ran, the farther Oliver seemed. His son was right there, but the house refused to let him close the distance. Then Oliver screamed. Eric snapped his head up. A hand shot out from the open doorway behind Oliver. Too long, fingers like twisted branches. It clamped around the boy's shoulder and dragged him backward. "No!" Eric roared, throwing himself forward. But as Oliver was pulled inside, the door slammed shut and vanished. The hallway snapped back to normal, leaving Eric sprawled on the floor, panting. The space where Oliver had been just moments ago was now solid wall. Gone. Just gone. Vanessa's scream sent a jagged spike of ice through Eric's chest. She pulled at his arm, sobbing. "Where is he? Eric, where is he?" Eric stared at the wall, heart pounding against his ribs. He pressed his hands to the surface, frantic, running them over the plaster, the molding, the impossible smoothness of it. No seams, no hidden door. The house had taken him. They didn't sleep. They didn't stop searching. For the next 6 hours, they tore the house apart. They knocked on walls, listened for hollow spaces, shoved furniture aside, peeled back carpets, ripped open the floorboards in the closet where Oliver had first gone missing. Nothing. The house wasn't just bigger, it was alive. Eric could feel it. The way it seemed to shift when they weren't looking. The way doors felt subtly different each time they opened them. The way it was watching them. He sat on the edge of the bed, face in his hands. Vanessa was pacing. "We need to call someone," she said, voice shaking. "Police, firefighters, someone." "And tell them what?" Eric snapped, lifting his head. "That our house is growing and it ate our son?" Vanessa flinched. He exhaled, immediately guilty. But who the hell could help them? Then footsteps. Both of them turned. The sound was faint just above them. In the attic. Eric's pulse slammed against his throat. The attic hatch was in the hallway, and they hadn't touched it since moving in. Vanessa swallowed hard. "He's up there." Eric grabbed the stepladder. He climbed up, shoved the hatch open. Darkness. The attic was wrong. He had seen it before. It had been a normal space, a crawl space, filled with old insulation and exposed beams. Now, it was massive, a cavern of blackness, stretching far beyond what the roof should allow. The air inside was thick, damp, breathing. Something moved in the darkness. A whisper. A voice. "Daddy?" Eric's stomach twisted. It sounded like Oliver. But there was something off. Too slow. Too hollow. Eric pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the void and landed on a door, standing alone in the attic. A wooden door, half rotten, its handle tarnished with age. Something pounded on it from the other side. Eric's breath caught in his throat. Vanessa whispered from below, "Is he there?" Eric hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached out. His fingers brushed the handle. The second he touched it, a violent shockwave blasted through the attic. The walls shuddered. The house groaned, a deep, resonant sound like something waking up. Eric fell, crashing down the ladder, landing hard on the floor. Above them, the attic door slammed shut. Then, a new door appeared at the end of the hallway. The house wanted them to go deeper. Eric didn't want to go in. Every instinct screamed to get the hell out, to burn the place down, to run. But Oliver was in there. They had no choice. Hand in hand, Eric and Vanessa stepped through the door. It led to a hallway they had never seen before. A perfect copy of their own hallway, same pictures on the wall. Same rugs, same furniture. But the proportions were off. The ceiling was too low. The walls slanted inward, and at the far end, another door, and another beyond that, and another. An endless stretch of doorways leading deeper and deeper into the impossible house. Vanessa squeezed his hand. "We need to hurry." Eric nodded, and they stepped forward into the unknown. The hallway stretched before them. A series of identical doors, each leading deeper into the impossible house. Eric and Vanessa exchanged a glance. "We stick together," Eric said. His voice felt small in the suffocating silence. Vanessa nodded, gripping his hand so tightly it hurt. They stepped forward. The first door creaked open easily. Beyond it, another hallway, a perfect replica of the one behind them. Same light fixture, same scuff mark on the floor. Eric swallowed. No turning back now. They walked through. The door shut behind them. And when Eric turned to check, the door was gone. They moved quickly, fear tightening their chests. Each door led to another hallway. Slightly different. The rugs were sometimes longer. The ceiling dipped lower. One of the picture frames had Vanessa's face blurred out in its glass. The further they went, the more wrong things became. The baseboards weren't wood anymore, but flesh, veined, pulsing. The air thickened, smelled sour, metallic like blood, and the whispers started. "Mommy, help me." Oliver's voice. It was ahead, then behind, then above. Vanessa choked back a sob. "We need to find him, Eric." "I know." They ran, door after door, through shifting hallways, pushing deeper into the ever-growing house. Then, a fork. 2 hallways, side by side, identical. The whispers came from both. Eric's stomach twisted. "It's trying to confuse us." Vanessa looked from one hallway to the other, shaking. "What if we pick the wrong one?" Eric clenched his jaw, then a sound. A soft creak. His eyes flicked to the right hallway. The door at the far end was cracking open. Something was coming. "Left!" They bolted. The further they ran, the more distorted the house became. Rooms opened up where they shouldn't. The floor dipped, then tilted, forcing them to scramble on all fours. The furniture they passed moved on its own. A chair crawled into the hallway on spindly wooden legs. Eric nearly tripped when the stairs materialized beneath him. They were back in their house. The real one. Vanessa gasped. "What?" Their actual hallway. Oliver's door at the end. The smell of home. The sound of wind rattling the windows. Eric ran forward, grabbing the handle. It melted in his grip. The door wilted like wet paper, disintegrating into meat beneath his hands, and the walls peeled away. The illusion was gone. They were still inside it. The real house was somewhere else. They were in the belly of the thing now. Vanessa screamed. Eric spun. Something was standing in the hallway behind them. Tall. Gaunt. Skin stretched too tight over its bones. Its face was featureless. No mouth. No nose. Just deep sunken sockets where eyes should be. But Eric knew it was looking right at him. It took a step. A slow jerking movement. Vanessa yanked Eric forward. "Run!" They didn't look back. They ran until their lungs burned, until their legs gave out, until they reached a door unlike the others. It was old. Splintered wood, rusted hinges. A relic from some other house, some other time. Eric grabbed the handle, threw it open. Inside was a nursery. Oliver's. Everything was perfect. The soft blue walls. His tiny bed. The stuffed animals lined neatly on the shelf. And Oliver, sitting in the middle of the floor, smiling. "Daddy!" Vanessa, sobbing, fell to her knees, reaching for him. Eric hesitated. Something was wrong. Oliver tilted his head. His eyes were too wide. His teeth, just a little too sharp. He stretched out his arms. "Come play with me." Vanessa moved toward him. Eric grabbed her arm. "Wait." Oliver giggled. Then he blinked. All of his eyes. Not 2, but dozens. Blinking. Shifting across his face. Appearing and disappearing. Vanessa shrieked. Oliver's mouth split open. Too wide, too deep. Something moved inside. A second voice, his own, but deeper. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Eric slammed the door shut. The walls shook as the thing inside pounded against it. A low gurgling laugh filled the air. The hallway started to collapse. Eric grabbed Vanessa and ran. They ran blindly, no longer knowing where they were. The hallways writhed, the doors pulsed like gaping mouths. And then, a voice. Deep, calm, unfazed. SCP-184 detected, initiating containment. Eric barely had time to register what was happening before the wall exploded. A group of figures stormed in. Black combat gear, rifles raised. Eric barely had time to shield Vanessa before one of them grabbed him. "Stay down," the agent barked. Another figure strode forward, holding something metallic in their hands. A small dodecahedron-shaped object. SCP-184. The moment it was lifted, the house screamed. Eric felt it. A deep, wrenching agony as the hallway shrank. The impossible doors snapped shut. Everything shuddered, then collapsed. Eric woke up outside, flat on his back, the night sky above. Vanessa next to him, shaking. Their house, it was back. No extra hallways, no shifting walls, just normal. Except Oliver was still gone. Eric's breath hitched. He turned, grabbing one of the agents. "Where is my son?" The agent looked at him, expression blank. There was no child inside. Eric's vision blurred. "No! He was in there?" The agent didn't argue. Just pulled something from his pocket. A photo of their family. But instead of 3 people, it was just Eric and Vanessa. Oliver wasn't there. like he had never existed. Eric's stomach dropped, and from somewhere deep in the ruins of the house, a soft giggle. The world felt wrong without Oliver in it. Eric sat on the curb staring at their house, their normal house, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just been running for their lives inside its impossible corridors. But something was missing. Oliver. The Foundation agents were wrapping up. Black-suited personnel moved in eerie synchronization, securing the area, setting up containment barriers. One of them, a tall woman with a tight bun and cold, clinical eyes, was speaking to Vanessa, but she looked numb. Eric barely heard anything until the agent turned to him. "You don't remember having a son?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Eric's stomach turned. "What?" She held up the photo again, the same family picture. "Him, Vanessa, no Oliver." "You don't remember," she repeated. "But you know he existed." The words hit like a slap. Eric's breathing went shallow. He could see Oliver in his mind, his messy blonde hair, his missing front tooth, the way he'd drag his stuffed dinosaur everywhere. But the more he tried to hold on to it, the more it blurred. His heart slammed against his ribs. I remember him," he whispered. "I do, but..." The woman's gaze softened, just a fraction. "That's why we're still here." Eric's hands curled into fists. "Where is he?" She didn't answer. Instead, she motioned toward the remains of their house. The inside had collapsed when SCP-184 was removed. But the house wasn't empty. Something moved. A flicker of motion behind a second-floor window. A small shadow. Vanessa gasped. "Oliver!" Eric shot up. "Oliver!" The boy in the window turned. Eric's breath caught. It was him, but it wasn't. Oliver's face was wrong, blurred, like a photograph that had been handled too many times. The details had worn away. His eyes weren't there, just empty patches of skin. Vanessa let out a broken sob. The window rippled like water. Oliver's shape distorted, flickering, before he took a step backward, into the wall, and vanished. Vanessa screamed. Eric ran toward the house. Agents tackled him to the ground. "Let me go!" he roared, fighting against them. The woman crouched beside him. "Listen to me," she said, voice calm but firm. "Your son is in there, but he is not the same." Eric's vision blurred. "I don't care, I have to get him." The woman exhaled. Then a new sound, a scraping, coming from inside the walls. The agents froze. The sound grew louder, a skittering, scratching noise moving from room to room. Then, a whisper. "Mommy?" Vanessa's breath hitched. The woman signaled the agents, "We need to move, now!" But Eric wasn't listening. He was staring at the front door. It was open. They had sealed it. He had watched the Foundation secure it. But now it was wide open, leading into impossible darkness. And from deep inside, a giggle, faint, echoing. "Come play with me, Daddy." Eric's blood ran cold. The woman grabbed his arm. "We are leaving." She turned to Vanessa. "You too, now." But Vanessa wasn't moving. Her hands trembled at her sides. She took a shaky step toward the door. "Vanessa," Eric choked. "Don't." She didn't look at him. Her eyes were locked on the doorway. The darkness pulled at her, a mother's instinct. A need so powerful it overrode logic, fear, survival. She whispered, "I can still hear him." Eric grabbed her wrist. "No, he's not Oliver anymore," Vanessa snapped. "How can you say that?" She sobbed, wrenching away from him. "He's our son!" And before anyone could stop her, she stepped inside. The door slammed shut. Vanessa was gone. Eric's heart stopped. "No!" He lunged forward, but the moment he touched the doorknob, the entire house shuddered. The walls breathed, and the door vanished. Nothing but solid wall where it had been. Eric hit it with his fists, screaming, "Give her back!" Silence. Then, a soft knock. From inside, slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Eric pressed his forehead against the wall, trembling. "Vanessa?" Nothing. Then, her voice, but wrong, flat, hollow, like a recording played backward. "Come play with us." The wall rippled. And then, silence. Vanessa was gone. Eric didn't move, didn't speak. The woman knelt beside him, voice softer now. "I'm sorry." He barely heard her. His wife, his son, both taken, like they had never existed. The Foundation agents moved around him, setting up reinforced electromagnets around the property. placing signage danger, restricted area, do not enter. They were sealing it away, locking his family inside. Eric turned to the woman. His voice was raw. "Can't you get them back?" She hesitated, then shook her head. Eric felt something inside him break. He turned back to the house, to the place where the front door had been. He could still hear them, faint, distant. Oliver's voice. "Daddy?" Vanessa's whisper. "Come inside." The wall shifted, just for a second, like it was breathing, like it was waiting. Eric closed his eyes and walked away. Vanessa didn't scream when the door shut behind her. She knew deep in her bones this was a mistake. The house was breathing. She could feel it in the air, thick and damp like the inside of a lung. The wallpaper pulsed. The floor felt softer beneath her feet, like she was walking on something alive. But none of it mattered, because Oliver was here. She could hear him. "Mommy?" His voice was close, just down the hall. Vanessa wiped her tears, steeling herself. "I'm coming, baby." She stepped forward, and the house shifted. The hallway stretched, pulled like melted wax. The walls bulged inward, tightening around her. The ceiling pressed lower. Vanessa stumbled, her breath hitching. The door behind her was gone. She was inside now, and the house was watching. She forced herself to move. Oliver's voice echoed from all directions, faint, warped. "Mommy, where are you?" She turned a corner and gasped. Oliver stood at the end of the hallway. His back was to her, small shoulders trembling. "Oliver," she sobbed, running forward. She didn't see the hallway stretch beneath her feet, didn't notice the walls curving inward, swallowing the space behind her. She only saw her son. Vanessa reached for him, and he turned. Her heart stopped. It was Oliver, but not. His face was wrong. Too smooth, blurred at the edges like a half-formed memory. His lips moved, but his voice lagged behind. "Mommy?" His mouth didn't match the words. Vanessa's breath caught. "Ollie?" His eyes widened. Then, the skin on his face slid sideways. A second smile peeled open on his cheek. Then a third. Then a fourth. Teeth lined his face in rows. His voice glitched. "Mommy, mommy, mommy, mommy." The hallway collapsed, and Oliver lunged. Vanessa screamed. She threw herself backward, barely dodging his grasp. Oliver's body jerked. His limbs bent at wrong angles. His head twitched side to side like a puppet with its strings tangled. He smiled. All of his mouth smiled. "Play with me, Mommy." Vanessa ran. The hallway twisted beneath her feet. Rooms opened and shut at random, the walls warping. She threw herself through a door and fell. The ground vanished. She tumbled down, 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 slamming into something wet. The air was thick. Vanessa groaned, pushing herself upright. She was in a room, a perfect copy of their kitchen, but the walls were too soft. She reached out, touching the nearest surface. It squished. Her stomach twisted. The wall was flesh, warm, pulsing. A heartbeat thrummed beneath her palm. She stumbled back, breathing hard. She wasn't in a house. She was in a body, and it was growing. Footsteps. Vanessa spun. At the other end of the kitchen, a doorway peeled open like an unzipping wound, and something stepped through. Tall, thin, unformed, a human shape with no features. Its skin was translucent, empty, like it was waiting to be filled. It took a shaking breath and mimicked her stance. Vanessa's skin crawled. She took a step back. The thing copied her. One step, then another. It raised its hands just like she did. A low whisper filled the air, not in words, but in thoughts. In her thoughts, it was learning. It was becoming her. Vanessa's breath hitched. The thing twitched. Then it smiled, a perfect copy of her own expression. And it whispered, "I am Vanessa." Vanessa ran. She ran until she couldn't anymore. The halls twisted, doors appearing and vanishing. The house was watching, and it was playing. Vanessa collapsed in a dead-end room, sobbing. She was trapped. She would never leave. Then, a sound, a voice, familiar, clear. "Vanessa?" Her breath caught. Eric. Eric was inside. She ran toward the voice, heart hammering, tears streaming. She rounded the corner and saw him, Eric, standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with relief. "Vanessa, thank God." She sobbed. She ran to him, arms open, then stopped. His feet weren't touching the floor. He floated, suspended, like a marionette. His mouth twisted into a grin. Then, his lips slid off his face, and something else smiled underneath. The house spoke through him, and it laughed. Vanessa froze. Eric, or what wore his face, stood in the doorway, smiling too wide. The skin of his lips had peeled away, revealing a second grin underneath. The house was wearing him. Vanessa took a step back, heart hammering. No, you're not real. Eric tilted his head. The motion spread, like his whole body was shifting beneath his skin. Why do you run, Vanessa? His voice was wrong, layered, a dozen different tones overlapping. Behind him, the walls twisted, flesh rippling, swallowing the doorframe, sealing her in. There was no escape. The house had her now, and it wasn't done playing. Outside the house, Eric was losing his mind. The Foundation agents had been sealing the house away for hours now, setting up electromagnetic dampeners, barriers, some kind of containment procedure for SCP-184. None of it mattered. Vanessa was still inside, and Eric could still hear her screaming. The house had taken her, just like it had taken Oliver, and the Foundation was doing nothing. Agent Pierce, the woman in charge, stood beside him, arms crossed, unmoved. Eric's voice was raw. You can't just leave them in there. Pierce exhaled. They're already gone. Eric's hands shook. That's bullshit. You don't know that. She turned to face him, gaze cold. I do. Then why the hell can I still hear them? Pierce hesitated. For the first time, something shifted in her face. Something like doubt. Inside the house, Vanessa backed away from the thing wearing Eric's face. It stepped forward. Its skin split open, peeling down its sides like an unfolding cocoon. A second form stepped out from within. Another Vanessa, perfectly identical. She smiled. I remember you, she whispered. Vanessa shook her head. No, you're not me. The copy tilted her head. Aren't I? The walls breathed. Vanessa's breath hitched. She looked down. Her feet were sinking. The floor was swallowing her, becoming her, molding around her skin like wet clay. She screamed. The fake Vanessa laughed. Just let go, she cooed. The house will remember you. It remembers everything. The walls pulsed. Shapes formed in them, faces. Distorted, twisted, familiar. Eric, Oliver, herself, all trapped in the endless growing mass of the house. It wasn't a building anymore. It was a body, a living, breathing mind. And she was next. Outside, Eric grabbed Pierce's arm. Send me in. Her jaw clenched. That's suicide. I don't care. His voice cracked. I have to try. Pierce hesitated. Then static burst across her radio. A new voice, urgent. Command, this is Task Force Lambda 3. We have an emergency. Pierce frowned. Go ahead. Containment is failing. The house is still expanding. Eric's stomach dropped. The agent's voice wavered. That's impossible. SCP-184 was removed. A pause. Then, ma'am, I don't think the object was causing this. I think the house learned. Eric's breath caught. The house was still growing. It didn't need SCP-184 anymore. It was alive now, and it was never going to stop. Inside, Vanessa was sinking. The house was consuming her. She thrashed against it, but the walls wrapped around her arms, her legs. She was becoming part of it, like everyone else. She sobbed, Please, I just want my son. The house shuddered. Then, a door opened, right in front of her. Beyond it, a nursery, Oliver's. Her heart stopped. Vanessa screamed, ripping herself free from the fleshy walls, dragging herself toward the door, and inside. Oliver stood in the center, small, fragile, but his face was wrong, blurred, his features flickering, warping, 1,000 versions of him trying to form at once. Mommy, he whispered. Vanessa's throat tightened. Oh, baby. She reached for him, and the walls erupted. A second Oliver stepped out, then a third, then dozens, hundreds, a flood of shifting, half-formed copies, all whispering, Mommy. Vanessa screamed. The nursery dissolved. She was falling again, into something deep, something endless. Outside, the house was expanding. The Foundation agents scrambled. Orders barked through radios. More electromagnets activated. Eric pushed forward. He didn't care about the Foundation, didn't care about containment. He just needed Vanessa. Then he saw it. A crack in the structure, a door, barely open, and from inside a whisper, Eric. His breath caught. Vanessa. She was still in there. Without thinking, Eric ran straight into the house. Pierce's voice roared behind him. "No, stop him!" The agents lunged, but it was too late. Eric stepped through. The door slammed shut and vanished. Eric hit the floor hard. He groaned, pushing himself upright. The air was thick, damp, like a crawl space after a storm. The walls around him breathed, shifting slightly, alive. He was inside the house, inside whatever it had become, and Vanessa was still here. He could hear her, somewhere in the distance, sobbing. Eric staggered forward. "Vanessa!" His voice echoed, not like sound bouncing off walls, more like something was repeating it, mimicking, mocking. "Vanessa!" The walls whispered back. He ignored them. He moved fast, pushing through door after impossible door. Every room was wrong. A copy of a space he recognized, Oliver's nursery, their bedroom, the kitchen, but distorted. The angles bent wrong. The furniture was made of the same pulsing flesh as the walls. Then, a sound, shuffling, something moving behind him. Eric turned slowly and froze. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, thin, empty. It had his shape, his face, but it wasn't him. It smiled and stepped forward. Somewhere else in the house, Vanessa was running. Doors slammed behind her. The walls groaned. The house was collapsing. She knew it was different now. Not just a house, not just SCP-184. Something else. Something bigger. Something waking up. Then, she saw him. "Eric!" He turned. Relief flooded his face. "Vanessa!" He ran toward her and stopped. Her stomach dropped. Something was wrong. The air between them rippled, like two versions of the same moment overlapping. Eric's face shifted. His jaw slid sideways. He grinned too wide. Vanessa. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't Eric. It was learning him, trying to become him. She turned to run and slammed into something solid, arms wrapped around her. A real human warmth. Vanessa. Eric. The real one. She sobbed, clutching him tight. The thing wearing his face tilted its head. Then it split, peeling apart, its human shape unraveling into raw, twitching mass. And then, the house screamed. Outside the house, Pierce watched the building tremble. The agents were panicking, equipment failing, walls growing over their containment structures. The house was fighting back. She grabbed her radio. "We're losing control." Then, a doorway opened in the center of the collapsing house, and two people stumbled out. Pierce's eyes widened. Eric and Vanessa. They hit the ground hard. Eric gasped for air. Vanessa clutched him, shaking, eyes wild. The doorway behind them collapsed in on itself. The walls crushed inward, crumpling like paper, imploding. Then, it was over. The house was gone, nothing but an empty lot. And silence. Aftermath. Pierce knelt in front of them. "Tell me something," she said quietly. "What's your son's name?" Eric's breath hitched. Vanessa squeezed his hand. They both knew the answer, but neither of them could say it, because the house had taken it. Had taken him, like he had never been there. Vanessa sobbed. Pierce sighed. "Let them go," she ordered. "But ma'am." "Let them go." The agent stepped back. Eric pulled Vanessa close, and together, they walked away. From a house that no longer existed, from a son that had never been, and from a horror that would never stop growing, ever. Now, let's dive into some of the fan theories and analysis surrounding SCP-184. The SCP Foundation is known for its intricate and often terrifying anomalies, and SCP-184 is no exception. This object, with its ability to expand the inner dimensions of enclosed structures, has sparked a lot of speculation and debate among fans. One prevalent theory suggests that SCP-184's anomalous properties could be responsible for the creation of vast, nonsensical spaces reminiscent of the Backrooms urban legend, a seemingly infinite maze of randomly generated rooms. The idea posits that SCP-184, when left unchecked, could expand spaces to such an extent that they become endless labyrinths, detached from our conventional understanding of architecture and physics. Another intriguing analysis delves into the philosophical implications of SCP-184's expansions. As it enlarges and replicates rooms, The copies become increasingly distorted, with objects appearing in incorrect materials or configurations. This progression raises questions about the nature of creation and the degradation of originality. Is SCP-184 mindlessly mimicking its surroundings? Or is there a deeper, perhaps conscious intent behind its alterations? Some enthusiasts have speculated that SCP-184 might be linked to other anomalous locations within the SCP universe. For instance, it's hypothesized that SCP-184 could be responsible for the creation of certain locations of interest that exhibit bizarre and expansive properties. This connection suggests a broader influence of SCP-184 on the anomalous architecture observed in various SCP cases. In terms of containment, the SCP Foundation has implemented strict measures to prevent SCP-184 from causing uncontrolled expansions. The object is kept attached to a high-power electromagnet, preventing it from affecting any structures. The containment area is designed to resemble a park, with SCP-184 and its containment magnet disguised as a statue to avoid drawing public attention. The allure of SCP-184 lies not only in its physical effects, but also in the existential questions it poses. Its ability to distort reality challenges our perceptions of space and structure, prompting us to consider the boundaries of human understanding. If you've enjoyed this exploration into the mysteries of SCP-184 and wish to delve deeper into the enigmatic world of the SCP Foundation, consider subscribing to our channel. By doing so, you'll stay updated with our latest content, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to uncover the unknown. Don't forget to like this video if you found it intriguing, and share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you captivating stories from the depths of the anomalous. SCP. Subscribe, comment, play.